It is 2:47 hours on May 17, 1943. Wing Commander Guy Gibson and his Halifax bomber cross the German border flying at precisely 60 feet above a landscape rendered monochromatic by moonlight. Behind him, a procession of aircraft moves in formation through the night sky, each one carrying an object that defies immediate comprehension. Beneath the fuselage of each plane, a cylindrical steel drum rotates slowly, engineered to spin at 500 revolutions per minute. This is not a conventional bomb. No orthodox bombardier sits hunched over his bombsight, calculating trajectory and wind drift with the instruments of traditional aerial warfare. What hangs beneath these aircraft has emerged from a mathematical hypothesis so audacious that even the men who conceived it scarcely believed it would function. Within hours, this device and the equations that shaped it would either breach the most heavily fortified dams in Nazi Germany or dash the entire operation into catastrophic failure. The calculations that made this moment possible had taken months to develop, had required leaps of intuition that crossed the boundary between engineering science and something approaching faith, and would ultimately reshape the very nature of precision bombing. This is the story of the bouncing bomb, but more specifically, it is the story of the mathematics that made it real. The Ruhr Valley represented the industrial heartland of the German war machine. Within its borders and fed by its rivers lay the furnaces, foundries, and factories that transformed raw materials into weapons of war. Steel production, electrical generation, chemical manufacturing, all depended upon the vast reservoirs that had been built across the region's major waterways. The dams themselves were monuments to German engineering and ambition. The Möhne Dam, constructed between 1908 and 1913, held back a reservoir of 134 million cubic meters of water. Its structure a massive gravity-based design rising nearly 40 meters from the valley floor. The Eder Dam, completed in 1914, was even larger, capable of storing 202 million cubic meters. These were not delicate structures. They were built with the confidence of engineers who believed themselves beyond vulnerability. 2 meters of reinforced concrete and stone comprised the outer walls, sloped at precisely calculated angles to withstand the immense pressure exerted by the water behind them. Beneath this concrete lay intricate drainage systems and galleries designed to detect and manage seepage. The dams had resisted conventional aerial attack. Bombs dropped from altitude lost precision as they fell, and those that struck the concrete face detonated upon impact, their explosive force dissipating harmlessly into the valley air rather than being transmitted through the dam structure itself. The Royal Air Force had attempted bombing raids previously, and the dams remained intact. What was required was not greater explosive force, but an entirely new method of delivery. The challenge seemed mathematically impossible. An aircraft approaching at altitude presented an easy target to anti-aircraft guns positioned on the dam itself. The answer, if one existed at all, lay not in greater violence but in geometry, in understanding how an object behaves when it strikes a surface traveling at extraordinary speed. In the offices and workshops of Vickers Armstrongs at Weybridge, Surrey, a chief engineer named Barnes Wallis had begun to think about water in a manner that most men would never consider. Wallis approached the problem not as a bombardier seeking to destroy, but as a physicist observing the behavior of spheres in motion. He recognized a principle as old as childhood itself. A stone, when thrown at a shallow angle across still water, will skip. The stone does not sink. Instead, it strikes the surface, rebounds elastically, and travels further. This phenomenon occurs because the water, on impact, does not instantly yield. For a fraction of a second, it behaves almost as a solid, offering resistance. But this could work only if the stone struck at precisely the correct angle, with precisely the correct velocity. Wallis began to calculate. His equation suggested that a spherical object, spinning backwards and approaching the water at low altitude, might achieve this effect. The backward spin would interact with air pressure and water dynamics in a manner that would encourage the sphere to rise after impact, effectively hopping forward across the surface. He commenced experiments with 20-pound spheres dropped into a specially constructed water tank at Weybridge. The spheres bounced. They skipped across the water with remarkable consistency, provided the parameters remained exact: the spin rate, the approach altitude, the velocity. Each variable had to sit within a narrow envelope of tolerance. The mathematics of the spinning sphere demanded unprecedented precision from the men who would carry the weapon. Gravity pulled downward at 9.81 meters per second squared, a constant that could not be negotiated with. Air resistance, density, humidity, temperature, each of these factors altered the trajectory minutely. At low altitude, traveling at 380 kilometers per hour, an aircraft would cover its own length in the time it took a pilot to draw a breath. The bomb itself had been redesigned entirely around Wallace's insights. The original concept of a spherical projectile evolved into an ellipsoid, a shape that improved stability and control. The final device measured 50 centimeters in diameter and weighed 4,196 kilograms, a figure determined not by aesthetics but by the ballistic calculations that Wallace had painstakingly developed. The bomb required a motor driven by a hydraulic motor to generate the necessary backspin. This motor was itself engineered to precise specifications, capable of accelerating the spheroid to exactly the required rotational velocity. The entire assembly had to be suspended from the Lancaster bomber in a special cradle that allowed rotation but prevented unwanted movement. Each component served the larger mathematical structure that Wallace had conceived. The bombers themselves were modified extensively. Navigation equipment was upgraded to provide the precision targeting that the mission demanded. Spotlights were fitted to the fuselage, two intersecting beams that would allow the pilot to judge altitude with accuracy previously impossible. When the two beams converged into a single spot on the ground below, the aircraft sat at precisely 60 feet above the surface. Speed was standardized and monitored with watches synchronized to the second. Distance was measured through calibration against landmarks identified on the approach route. The entire operation, from the coast of Holland to the moment of bomb release, was choreographed by mathematics and executed with the precision of clockwork. If you are finding this exploration of engineering and innovation interesting, a quick subscribe would mean a great deal to the channel. These stories of human ingenuity and technical achievement are the beating heart of what we do here, and your support helps us continue investigating the science beneath the history. The first Lancaster of 617 Squadron to attempt the attack approached the Moona Dam at 0:28 hours on May 17th. Wing Commander Gibson held the aircraft steady at the required altitude, the dual spotlights converging beneath his fuselage, the bomb's spin rate steady at the rotational velocity that mathematics had deemed essential. He released the device at precisely the calculated moment. The bomb struck the water. It did not sink. It bounced. The mathematics made manifest in action. The spheroid skipped once, twice, 3 times across the surface, the backspin interacting with the water and gravity and air pressure in the manner Wallace had predicted. It struck the dam wall at the water line. The explosion occurred not on impact but subsequent to penetration, the bomb sinking against the concrete face and detonating at depth, where the full force of the blast could be transmitted through the structure rather than dissipating into the air. The Moona Dam was breached. Water poured from the fissure. The second aircraft attacked and missed. The third struck home. The fourth and fifth both achieved successful hits. By 00:49 hours, the dam had failed catastrophically. Some 330 million cubic meters of water began flowing into the valley below. The following aircraft proceeded to the Eder Dam, where 2 strikes were necessary before that massive structure also surrendered to the mathematics that had been refined through months of calculation. The Edersee Reservoir emptied, the water cascading downward with irresistible force. Downstream, communities were inundated. Industrial facilities were submerged. Production at the Krupp Steelworks was severely disrupted, the impact rippling through German war production in ways that would persist for months. The German response to the raid centered upon analysis. Immediately, their engineers examined the ruins of the dams to understand what had occurred. They found no crater suggesting conventional bombing. They discovered instead that the structures had been breached from within, the concrete failing not at the impact point but at depth, where internal stresses had been concentrated by an explosive force detonating underwater. The Germans concluded quite correctly that the British had developed a weapon for which no conventional defense existed. The torpedo nets, positioned before each dam to prevent underwater attacks, had proven useless against a device that flew through the air before impacting water. Anti-aircraft guns could not be positioned effectively without blocking essential access routes. Defensive measures hastily constructed over subsequent months never truly answered the fundamental problem. The British had found a way to deliver explosive force to a location, and in a manner that established German engineering could not withstand. The dams were rebuilt, but they remained vulnerable to the same attack. The psychological impact extended beyond the technical realm. German high command was forced to confront the reality that no infrastructure was truly secure from British air power, provided that sufficient ingenuity could be applied to the problem. The bouncing bomb, then, was not merely a mechanical device. It was a statement written in mathematics, that determination coupled with engineering knowledge and precision could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The American approach to similar problems had taken a different trajectory. American engineers, confronted with the challenge of dam destruction, had pursued massive tonnages of conventional ordnance dropped from high altitude. The results had been disappointing. The philosophy differed fundamentally from Wallace's approach. Where the Americans increased force, Wallace had increased precision. Where the Americans attempted to overwhelm defenses through sheer destructive power, Wallace had sought to circumvent them entirely through understanding of physics. The Soviet Union, for its part, had little concern with such matters, possessing neither the dams nor the technological infrastructure to conduct such specialized operations. The German bombing campaign against British dams during the same period had relied upon conventional approaches, with minimal success. The bouncing bomb represented something altogether different, not merely a new type of ordnance, but a new category of thinking about how technological problems might be solved. Other nations recognized this. The American military, studying the raid and its results, attempted to produce their own version of Wallace's device. The efforts met with limited success. The engineering tolerances, the coordination required between all the variables, the precision in execution. These could not easily be replicated without access to Wallace's detailed calculations and the experimental work that had validated them. The bouncing bomb remained distinctly British, a product of British engineering reaching its apex during an era of existential struggle. The impact of Operation Chastise extended far beyond the immediate material damage to German infrastructure, significant though that proved. The raid demonstrated, conclusively and dramatically, that precision bombing guided by genuine understanding of physics and engineering could achieve what blanket bombing campaigns could not. The cost had been substantial. 8 of the 19 aircraft dispatched did not return, and 5 crews were lost entirely. Yet the strategic gains were undeniable. German water supplies were disrupted. Industrial production suffered measurable setback. The message, furthermore, resonated through the Allied planning apparatus. Innovation coupled with rigorous scientific method could solve problems deemed impossible through conventional approaches. The bouncing bomb influenced subsequent bombing strategy, not in the sense that the specific device was repeatedly employed. It was not, for the dams were rapidly modified and the tactical circumstances never perfectly repeated, but in the sense that the principle became embedded in the Allied bombing campaign. Precision, mathematics, engineering ingenuity, these became the watchwords of advanced air operations. The surviving bouncing bombs were preserved, not as weapons for further use, but as monuments to a specific moment when human calculation met human determination. Today, examples rest in museums across Britain, at the Royal Air Force Museum, at the Dambusters Memorial Museum near the Moona, and in specialist collections maintained by enthusiasts of aviation history. They sit in silence, these spheroids of purpose, their surfaces marked by the months of experimentation and refinement that shaped them. They hold no kinetic energy now, no capacity for destruction. Yet they embody something that has never lost its potency, the power of the human mind to visualize a solution to a seemingly impossible problem, and through mathematics, persistence, and engineering rigor, to make that solution real. Operation Chastise concluded in the early hours of May 17, 1943, with the bombing runs complete and the surviving aircraft turning westward for home. In the darkness behind them, the dams remained breached, the water still flowing downward, the mathematics still playing out in the physics of destruction and disruption.